Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to radically challenge absolutely everything you think you know about the creators of your favorite books, movies, and stories. See, we've all been taught to kind of worship this idea of the lone, brooding artist, but the truth? The truth is infinitely more complex, highly collaborative, and honestly, a whole lot more fascinating.
So let's set this up with a deceptively simple question. Who really wrote your favorite book? When you picture its creation, you almost certainly picture one single name, right? One individual sitting alone at a desk, pouring their unique soul out onto the page. But as we dive into the historical and sociological data today, we're going to find out that the answer is so much messier and way more collaborative than that single name on the cover suggests.
Okay, let's dive into this. On one side, we have what we call the Romantic myth. This is that classic 18th century illusion of the solitary genius. The completely isolated creator struck by a sudden bolt of unique inspiration. But then, you contrast that with the historical reality. Scholars who track how texts actually move from a rough draft to a final printed copy repeatedly find that writing is deeply collaborative. It's networked, it's cumulative, and it involves so many different hands. Editors, correspondents, ghostwriters, they all make absolutely crucial changes. Authorship isn't some zero-sum game played by one person. It's really a collective enterprise.
Which brings us to Section 1, Inventing the Solitary Genius.
And this brilliantly illustrates why we're so attached to this solitary myth in the first place. We have to look at post-structuralist theorists like Michel Foucault. Foucault argued that the author isn't actually the singular creative source from which a text springs. Instead, the author is really just an epistemic classifying concept, what he called an author function. Think about it like this. The name Shakespeare doesn't just point to a human being. It's a way to group together a whole corpus of plays and sonnets, organizing that entire literary field. The concept of the modern author was actually a pretty recent invention. It was driven heavily by early copyright laws and philosophers like Kant, who basically started treating an author's thoughts as personal property to be protected and sold.
Let's look at how this plays out in Section 2, the Novel Factory. Now that we know the solitary author is largely just a legal and historical construct, let's completely tear down that lone genius myth by looking at the massive industrial scale of commercial publishing. Just look at this staggering number, 1 in 17. Between the years 2006 and 2010, 1 in every 17 novels sold in the United States was authored by James Patterson. In 2012 and 2013, he published 13 books a year. I mean, how on earth can one single genius produce that much polished writing? Well, the short answer is, he doesn't. This really builds a picture of the author as a factory. Just compare Alexander Dumas from the 19th century straight across to James Patterson in the 21st. Both operated these massive writing factories. Dumas, who you probably know from The Three Musketeers, managed to publish 400 novels. How? Well, his critics actually joke that he had a whole army of ghostwriters hidden down in his cellar doing the actual heavy lifting while he sat upstairs drinking champagne. Fast forward to today, and James Patterson operates a super modern, highly efficient version of that exact same thing. He writes detailed outlines, hires professional co-writers to draft the text, does some quality control editing, and then slaps his massive name right on the cover.
So what does this all mean? It tells us that in these highly commercial models, the author's name is definitely not a guarantee of solitary, isolated labor. No, it's become a trademark. It's a corporate stamp of approval, assuring you, the reader, that you're buying a very specific, plot-driven product. The name on the cover, it's really just a brand, honestly. No different than a designer label on a piece of clothing.
Let's shift gears a bit in Section 3, the wisdom of the crowd.
It's really vital to recognize that collaboration isn't just a tool used to generate massive corporate profits in commercial publishing. It is actually the driving engine behind some of the most altruistic, incredible educational projects in human history. If we trace this timeline of the knowledge crowd, we see that way before the internet, back in 1879, an appeal went out for volunteer readers to help build the Oxford English Dictionary. This was crowdsourcing before crowdsourcing was even a word. By 1928, they had completed 12 volumes using over 6 million little slips of paper mailed in by everyday volunteers. Then, fast forward to 2001, and that exact same democratic, crowdsourced spirit gave birth to Wikipedia, pretty much the ultimate digital commons, functioning entirely on collective intelligence.
And think about how Wikipedia operates. It functions completely without a single named author. Instead, it relies on tens of thousands of volunteer donors. To keep everything from devolving into chaos without a central author, the community acts as a single collective author, by strictly sticking to 3 core policies: no original research, strict verifiability, and a neutral point of view. Through this consensus-driven activity, the crowd effectively writes, edits, and refines the text perpetually.
Now, because Wikipedia's pages are basically always a work in progress and multi-authored, traditional individual copyright is basically useless. So instead, we get the rise of models like copyleft and Creative Commons. This completely throws out that 18th century concept of individual ownership we talked about. It replaces it with this altruistic ethic, a digital gift economy, where works are thought of as owned by no one and are entirely free to be copied, modified, and reshared for the benefit of everyone.
Moving right along to Section 4, Remix and Fan Fiction.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this quote. This ethos of sharing and modifying means the internet age hasn't just challenged the concept of the author, it has completely collapsed the boundaries between the reader and the writer. This quote from musician and cultural theorist DJ Spooky hits the nail on the head. He says, download, remix, edit, sequence, splice into your memory bank. The prevailing view in digital networks today is that culture shouldn't be locked away behind rigid copyright laws. Instead, information and art should just flow freely, downloaded, remixed, and spliced together to create entirely new, transformative works.
And we see this transformative culture most visibly today in fan fiction. We see amateur writers taking established worlds, like say the Twilight series, and transforming them into massive new phenomena, like 50 Shades of Grey. But what's so fascinating is that this isn't actually a new trend at all. Scholars point out this is basically a return to ancient medial authorship. Just like the epic stories of Homer were shaped and circulated by a community of singers all working together, today's fan fiction writers are mediating and reshaping existing stories through highly collaborative, peer-supported networks. It's the same thing, just in different millennium.
But sociological data shows us that transformative fiction serves a really powerful cultural function that goes way beyond just rewriting plots. It acts as a massive platform for representation. It amplifies marginalized voices, allowing writers to introduce racial diversity or reimagine LGBTQ+ relationships in mainstream text where they might have previously been completely excluded. It creates these incredibly supportive peer communities where people who felt invisible in traditional media can quite literally write themselves into the story.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer and leaves us with this lingering, super provocative question. From Alexander Dumas's Sellers to James Patterson's corporate spreadsheets, from the millions of paper slips at the Oxford English Dictionary to the vast digital commons of Wikipedia and fan fiction, if we acknowledge that all creation is ultimately a messy, beautifully complex collaboration, does the solitary author as we've always known it still exist? Or is it finally time for us to celebrate the crowd? Thank you so much for joining me to explore this one. Keep questioning what you read, and I'll see you in the next explainer.